Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. If you've ever found yourself completely lost in the sprawling, massive lore of Westeros, wondering how the stage was actually set for the saga we all know and love, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to sift through literally 12,000 years of incredibly dense history, and we're going to connect the dots to see how this whole thing began.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the ultimate Game of Thrones, it didn't just start with a few scheming lords in King's Landing, no way. Long before Ned Stark ever left Winterfell, or Daenerys hatched her dragons, this massive historical domino effect was set in motion. To really grasp the gravity of the story, we actually have to rewind the clock 12 millennia.
To make sense of it all, we're breaking this massive timeline down into 6 logical chapters. We've got the mythological dawn, heroes and the long night, invasions and empires, the Targaryen dynasty, Robert's rebellion, and finally, the game begins.
Chapter 1, The Mythological Dawn. We're going back 12,000 years.
Now, what's really interesting about this era is the stark contrast defining the ancient world. On one side, we have the original inhabitants, the children of the forest. These were small, magical beings. They worshiped the nameless old gods and carved those super haunting faces into the weirwood trees. But then, humanity arrived. The first man crossed over from the eastern continent of Essos, wielding these heavy bronze swords, and as they expanded, they started cutting down and burning the sacred weirwoods. Well, as you can imagine, that sparked a brutal, centuries-long war.
And the destruction was absolute. 12,000 years ago, the first man crossed the Arm of Dorne. By 10,000 years ago, the children grew so desperate they actually used cataclysmic magic to shatter that entire land bridge into the broken islands we now call the Stepstones. Crazy, right? Finally realizing they were basically facing mutual destruction, the two races met on the Isle of Faces 8,000 years ago to sign the pact. The first men took the open coasts and lands, and the children retreated to the deep forests. And it's really important to note here, the first men who settled in the north during this era, they are the direct ancestors of House Stark.
Moving on to Chapter 2, Heroes and the Long Night, the Age of Legends.
So this era is totally defined by an apocalyptic threat, the Others. You probably know them as the White Walkers. These icy beings emerged from the far north during a winter that literally lasted a generation, sweeping south and reanimating the dead as mindless whites. To survive this extinction-level event, the First Men and the Children of the Forest had to ally once again, fighting back with dragonglass and dragonsteel to finally drive the terror back into the cold.
In the aftermath of all that darkness, the permanent roots of Westeros were laid down. Brandon the Builder, of House Stark, raised a monumental 700-foot iced wall across the northern border, weaving it with ancient spells. He also helped found the Night's Watch, this sworn brotherhood designed to guard the realms of men. And down south, cunning figures like Lam the Clever and Garth Greenhand established the legendary lineages that would eventually become House Lannister and the Lords of the Reach. It's like a giant puzzle falling into place.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, Invasions and Empires. A shifting world.
The cultural shifts here are just massive. 6,000 years ago, the Andals crossed the sea. They brought advanced steel and a brand new religion, the Faith of the Seven. They completely conquered the south, but the north actually defended their borders at Moat Cailin, preserving the pure blood of the first men. Then, 1,000 years ago, warrior Queen Nymeria sailed 10,000 ships to settle in Dorne. And just 400 years ago, the doom of Valyria completely wiped out the greatest empire the world had ever seen, just gone in a single day.
To really understand that doom, we've got to look at Essos. Long before their destruction, simple shepherds discovered dragons in a volcanic chain called the 14 Fires. They harnessed these beasts to build the Valyrian Freehold, an unmatched empire of sorcery and dragon riders. But when the doom hit, the entire volcanic chain erupted, obliterating their civilization. So how did anyone survive? Well, a young girl named Daenerys the Dreamer foresaw the cataclysm in a prophetic vision. Because of her warning, just one noble family of dragon lords packed up their entire household and fled to a gloomy island outpost in the west called Dragonstone. And that family was House Targaryen.
Chapter 4, The Targaryen Dynasty, Blood and Fire.
So the crucial point here is this number, 0 AC, after the conquest. This is the absolute pivot point of all modern Westerosi history. In year 0, Aegon the First Targaryen, along with his sister wives Visenya and Rhaenys, launched a massive invasion of Westeros. Now, they didn't have a giant army, but they did have 3 unimaginably huge dragons. 6 of the 7 independent kingdoms either submitted or burned. To solidify his rule, Aegon took the melted, twisted swords of all his defeated enemies and literally used his dragon's breath to forge them into the Iron Throne.
But as you know, absolute power is a messy, chaotic thing to maintain. The Targaryen dynasty was absolutely plagued by internal conflict. First, you have the Dance of the Dragons, a brutal civil war that ended up killing almost all the royal dragons. Later on, the Blackfire Rebellion saw legitimate bastards bleeding the realm for generations. And finally, the Defiance of Duskendale, where King Aerys II was held hostage. That event completely shattered his sanity, cementing his legacy forever as the Mad King.
This leads right into Chapter 5, Robert's Rebellion, the breaking point.
Let's look at exactly how this dynasty collapsed. It all started with a massive scandal at the tourney at Harrenhal when Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen bypassed his own wife to crown Lyanna Stark. A year later, Rhaegar and Lyanna just vanished together. When Lyanna's father and brother demanded justice, the Mad King brutally executed them without a trial. And then he demanded the heads of young Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon. That right there changed everything. Their foster father, Lord Jon Arryn, flat out refused and instead raised his banners in open rebellion.
The realm quickly erupted into all-out war. In 282 AC, the defining moment arrived at the Trident, where Robert Baratheon crushed Rhaegar's chest with a warhammer. By 283 AC, Tywin Lannister ruthlessly sacked King's Landing, while his son, Jaime, assassinated the Mad King. As Robert claimed the Iron Throne, Ned Stark found his sister Lyanna dying in Dorne, and he returned with a mysterious infant named Jon Snow. Meanwhile, the last surviving Targaryen children were smuggled away into exile across the sea.
Which brings us to our final chapter. Chapter 6. The game begins. The year is 298 AC.
We should start back, Garrett urged, as the woods began to grow dark around them. The wildlings are dead. That right there is the very first chapter of the saga. It instantly grounds us in this eerie, ominous tone. Because you see, while the lords in the south are busy playing politics, something ancient and terrifying is waking up in the dark woods of the north.
Everything we've covered today has perfectly aligned the pieces on the board. Beyond the wall, Rangers encounter the returned others. The myths of the Long Night are literally coming back to life. Down in King's Landing, Jon Arryn mysteriously dies after uncovering a dark royal secret, which prompts King Robert to ride north to pull his old friend Ned Stark back into the dangerous world of politics. And across the Narrow Sea, a desperate Prince Viserys sells his young sister Daenerys to a warlord, all in exchange for an army.
Which leaves us with this final, burning question. We've just seen 12,000 years of magical pacts, fiery invasions, and dynasties shattering from within. The realm is more divided and treacherous right now than ever before. So what does this all mean? Who will survive when the ancient terrors of the Long Night finally return to face a dangerously divided realm? The history is laid out before you, but the real story, it's just beginning. I really hope this explainer is giving you the foundational map you need to dive into this incredible lore. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey, and keep exploring.